So, we're here to talk about Chapter 1, Communication Essentials. The main key terms that I found were communication was the exchange of messages, basically human interactions in a way, just summarized into one is communication. The idea of communicating with one another, and it could be through words, gestures, symbols, and there's many other ways, but symbols and gestures are like the main ones. Symbols are like, they convey a meaning, and they are very different across different cultures. For instance, nodding in certain different cultures, it can mean something else, while in another culture it could mean, nodding up and down, it could mean no in a different culture. Who knows? But like different things like let's just say like kissing on the cheek. In European cultures, it's common for you to kiss on the cheek as like a greeting, but in the US, that's not a thing. In US, people keep their own personal space instead of being more open to like things like hugs, just kisses on the cheek. But in the US, we keep our personal space. I'm from India. Indian people are usually very huggy, if that makes sense. Every time you see a family member, even just a friend, you usually just give them a hug. But let's talk about the other terms. It could include encoding, which is how we transform thoughts into messages, the way we choose our words and our tone. So whenever you have thoughts in your head, they don't instantly turn into words. Whenever you have an idea, it's not instantly a word. It's just you put your thoughts into a message that'll be understandable for other people. For instance, for me, I speak 3 different languages. I speak English, Punjabi, Hindi. Those two are 2 different Indian languages. I sometimes think in one different language, and I have to translate that in my head to English to be able to talk to some of my friends or just my partner, like in a project or something. But I think in a different language than I actually use English mostly on a daily basis. Whenever I'm talking to my family members, yes, I'll use those languages so I can instantly think and just use that. But most of the time when I'm communicating for instance, right now, I have to talk in English because it's commonly wide language. But decoding, like encoding, but decoding is just understanding messages to make sure there's no miscommunication going on, and making sure that your partner or whoever you're trying to convey a message to, whoever you're trying to communicate to, can understand what you're trying to say. The main reason we communicate is to exchange what's going on in our mind. There's no way to communicate without talking. There's ways, but like in the sense that you have to use your mind to get into somebody else's mind. If you're not using your mind, you're not communicating. You can't communicate without your mind. Let's go into some of the other terms. Interpersonal communication, which is just talking about how you communicate with people on like your inner circle. That could be family, relationships, things like that. Let's go into intrapersonal communications, is when you talk about like self-talk and how you talk to yourself whenever you're alone, how you get yourself ready, how you do certain things, and like how you make decisions. That's another thing that's part of intrapersonal communication, is making decisions in your head. Not all of us can just think something on the spot. Sometimes we have to think about something else first to be able to make a decision about it. We can't just make every decision spontaneously. We have to understand what's going on first, understand the situation, and understand the circumstances to make a full decision, which is intrapersonal communication. You're talking to yourself and looking at the pros and cons of the situation. Another thing is affiliation. Explain how communication shows connection through verbal and nonverbal cues strengthen relationships. Communication shows connection through verbal and nonverbal cues. Affiliation is a form of connection. For instance, things like hugging, kissing, even just like physical touch is a form of affiliation to another person, and that can help show them what you're thinking about. It's basically communicating, but a different way. A channel is something that's used to communicate. For instance, texting, that is a channel for you to send your thoughts to someone else digitally. A channel would be talking, let's just say, face to face or through physical touch. A channel would be pointing at something to show someone. Your finger is the channel. But feedback, that's another thing. Communication, the way we communicate, it's different for everybody. So the other person has to be able to understand what you're trying to communicate. And a lot of the times when you can't understand what the other person is trying to say or what they're trying to convey, a lot of the times it's not that we can't understand what they're saying, it's just we're misinterpreting what the other person is trying to say. That's why we have things like miscommunication, issues about communication, not being able to understand what, in our personal relationships, not being able to understand what's going on in the other person's head, or just other things like issues about what's going on in their life. If one person is saying one thing, but the other person is not understanding what they're saying and assuming something else, that's when you have miscommunication. That's about it. I mean, it's like 12:30 at night. You gotta go to sleep. But maybe I shouldn't have waited this long to do this assignment. Oh, there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about. Ethics, the morality of communication. If we aren't communicating with another, we have no purpose in life. We were put on this earth to communicate. If we can't communicate to one another, then how can we even live? I feel like human interaction is such an unappreciated thing, to where it's just, we do it so often, and it's a gift. We cannot live without it, but people don't appreciate it enough. I'm communicating to myself to a certain extent when I'm talking to this video, but I don't appreciate it. Like, I'm guilty of that, yes, but the ethics of communication. The ethics of communication would be things like communicating your personal values and making sure people understand what your views are, things like that. What else? Honestly, I know I'm breaking up here, but it's pretty late at night. It's almost 1. So if it was earlier in the day, if I wasn't busy earlier, I would have done it earlier, gotten it over with, and it would have been a lot better too. But here we are. It's okay. We're getting there. Relationships. That's another thing that I didn't really go into. Communication between relationships is really important overall. If you're not communicating with your partner, whether it's a family member or just someone else, if you're not communicating with them, how can you expect to understand what they're going through or understand what's even going on inside of their head? Communication is just understanding the other person or trying to get your point across. Communication is interaction between one another. I feel like I'm saying communication way too much, but this is human communication. Relationships require communication to exist, in the sense that if there was no such thing as communicating with one another, there would be no relationships. Relationships build on communication, and That's like a building block of relationships. Yeah, that's about it.